But we've also done a lot of other things beyond universities too. Entertainment, I mean, for a long time with Motown, a lot of even Kid Rock or Eminem. Michigan sort of had a global presence even in the entertainment world too. And I think part of our challenge is how do we leverage all this outreach that we have now? And as Michigan declines in size and population and stature, economic-wise, we will lose those assets. We won't have the same amount as we've got out there now. I brought in the two alumni associations to talk specifically about how do we leverage those assets. Well, the international assets would probably be one of the key assets for this state, especially with international foreign currency being stronger than ours a lot of times. And when we have unfortunately, we import more than we export at times, and I think Jim's going to talk a little bit about that as well. How do we counteract those things? How do we create new industry? How do we get universities and private sector to do more intellectual property? How do we get the right folks in this state to help turn us around? So that's part of it. And just to make it cleaner somewhat is by having a diverse economy with international folks. Is you really build your middle class, and that's the single biggest thing that Michigan can lose, that if we do not figure out a way to maintain a strong middle class, which has a disposable income, which creates purchasing power, which creates why Michigan was a unique state, that we had really rich people in the middle class and lower middle class, blue collar, that we were able to have the stratification even of middle class. That's all disappearing. In my district alone, I'm right next to Ford Motor Company, Elm Park, half of the city, and some Park. It was white collar, people there losing their jobs, and a lot of them were foreign nationals. I mean, we have people in from India and China, and that's changing too. You might hear about it from some of the other folks, but we actually know that the trend is changing. If you talk to some of the international law firms in Michigan, there's less and less graduates of universities wanting to stay in the state compared to the way it used to be once they graduated. So what are we doing to make sure that those sort of foreign nationals stay in our state and hopefully become entrepreneurs? And as you know, they're usually pretty successful at a lot of the entrepreneurship too. In my committee specifically, we've done just a few things to touch on in the way of the economy and quality of life. And it's a name we came up with. It's kind of long, but it serves its purpose. We've really tried to reach out, but just in my committee alone, we've probably brought in people from Sweden, Germany, Mexico, Israel, Switzerland, China, Korea, and the Philippines. Anecdotally, I can give you some business deal we did with most of them, but primarily the issues that we've worked with a lot of them is mainly batteries, wind turbines, alternative fuels. For example, the company, I believe it was up in Flint, where they processed the wastewater, turned it into alternative fuels. So, because they were Sweden was one of the leading countries to come up with probably the patent on it originally or something. I'm not sure how it worked out originally, but we actually had the consulate from Sweden in our committee to testify about it. Also on our committee, we created the Asian Pacific Commission. Some of you might know with the new census coming out, pay attention, but Michigan's largest immigration population was actually Asian. And do not realize that, we're lucky that, we're getting that inflow now, but how do we capture? One of the reasons we created the Asian Pacific Commission was how leverage those assets and how we can build those bridges between those relationships. In fact, I just met recently with Peter Toy, and I'm trying to figure out how we can create more consulates in Michigan. That's where the real bilateral, business is, when you can have a consulate. Instead of right now, you got to go to Chicago for most of the consulates in the Midwest. So Michigan used to have more, and I think we only got 5 right now. But if you go to Chicago, it's probably like 35, 40, I don't know how many they have. But that becomes very relevant, keeping us on the global map. We also did create a technology commission, which MSU was very involved with in creating it. Why we haven't funded it, but we'd like to. But we know that is so relevant to the whole international demeanor of the state. Obviously, having a mass airport, we brought my committee down to Metro Airport and met with Delta Airlines, and we've actually brought them in several times to testify on new non-stops. When you have to tunnel jump from Detroit to Chicago or New York or Atlanta to go overseas, that hurts our economy. The more nonstops we have directly to other countries becomes such a big issue for us to locate people to the state. So I've really tried to work hard at making sure we keep the global economy alive through our airport alone. And I touched on it a little bit, but the talent, keeping people here that do become the entrepreneurs is so strategic for us as a state. That's why, even though I'm from the suburbs of Detroit, Detroit is so critical for the turnaround of the state, along with parts of Grand Rapids as well. But how do we keep these little, not little, but how do we keep these urban centers alive? Because that's what a lot of people look for when more people around the world know Detroit than they do Michigan. So either through sports or whatever, a lot of people know the Pistons outside the state than they do know any other team. So it's those kind of things that really help brand us and market us. Part of the challenge with Michigan, and this is sort of more the implementation side of this, but we don't have the budget anymore to have people really overseas like we used to. We used to have someone in China, and I can't remember all the countries we were at one time. One was in Europe and probably South America. And we've lost a lot of those. So what's happening is you're getting, and I'm not trying to knock anyone, but you get more and more local initiatives going overseas. A friend of mine, one of the other state reps, she went to China, and she said 3 different Michigan groups were there within a month. And it confused some of the businesses that they were trying to make deals with, because they didn't know if it was this county or that county, and they thought each one of the counties was actually representing the whole state. And we wouldn't know any better if people were coming from China to here, and I think everyone was representing the whole country of China. So the MDC tries to do what they can in a limited budget, but we need more coordination, I think, and a systemic approach to how we deal with international relations. And I should just touch on real quickly 2 points, and this will be it. We don't do enough with Canada. That is going to be a leveraged opportunity. I won't get into the whole bridge discussion or any of those things, but making sure that cargo and goods and services flow across that border gives us a decisive advantage over almost all the other regions in the United States. How do we leverage that opportunity? We probably take it for granted. I mean, as a kid growing up in the Detroit area, I used to go to Canada all the time. It's way more difficult to get over there now. So what are we doing to make sure? I used to play rugby on a team over in Windsor, and it was easy for me just to go leave my house at 5 o'clock and be in Windsor at 5:30. And I'd always make practice. I can't do that now. So what are we doing to make sure that that process goes smoother? Because that's so critical for us to make sure Michigan has that advantage. And the last thing is, and hopefully you'll hear more of this from the other folks, is a systemic, it's hard as a state, but how do we make sure we really leverage our international image to the rest of the world? And, I don't know if it's necessarily the MEDC, and it just can't be the governor taking trips here and there. There has to be some kind of strategic vision of where the state wants to be on the international market, as well as just in general. Where are we when we want to transition? If our economy is changing dramatically, the automotives won't be our faces in other countries anymore. It's going to have to be us. Historically, we got away with a lot because the big 3 did a lot of keeping us on the global map. That's all changing now. So what is going to be our systemic solutions to those things too? And with that, thank you very much for having me today, and I think I turn it over to Jim now.